Hey everybody! On this episode of Gaming Collecting, me and Alex are returning to our 3 anime film series. This time covering the somewhat recently released The Boy and the Heron, Suzume, and Drifting Home. Like always, guys, spoilers afoot in this one, but otherwise, guys, on with the episode.
I feel like a burp coming. No!
Well,
No! I'm choking. Why did you start acting supposed to say no? I'm not ready.
because you said that after the button was already pressed. How you been, by the way?
Great anymore. If that's the intro to the podcast, that's fucking thank you. You always make me sound like a psychopath.
Oh, this one's
Not
already off
fair.
to a wonderful start.
It's not fair. Well, now at least I don't feel the burp anymore.
So it's been a weekend. It's been a week. It's been a long time.
Yes.
2024's been a year.
And it's not over yet. It's
No,
only...
my mantra for this year has been, what the fuck is this year?
You gotta do a meditative.
Well, no, because it's like every week something else fucking happens, and it's like, is this year gonna ever like stop being insane?
No.
It's like, who's getting canceled next? Like,
Who got canceled now?
I'd have to look. I know people have been getting canceled left and right this year.
Yeah. What's new? Scooby-Doo. Dave
Dave Grohl's got a confession to make, so.
Oh yeah, that was. When I saw that, I was just like, that's just like,
It's so funny.
It's not surprising. I, in all honesty, whenever I hear a celebrity cheating, I'm never really surprised because they're celebrities and it's
well, no,
easy.
We mentioned it last week, but what makes the Dave Grohl one so funny is the fact that for years he's been always known as like the nice guy of the music industry. Like he's literally like the grandpa, like nice man everyone loves. And it's like, nope. And he's also been on like a tirade recently about like complaining about certain individuals using his songs. And I mean, I get it, but at the same time, it's like they're still gonna pay you for it. Principles. I'm not going to go too deep into it. If people really want to know who I'm talking about, it's pretty obvious. But
yeah, I think like I don't know.
I'm so like indifferent to that shit. It's like I see it. I'm like, okay, old man yells at cloud again. Whatever. But yeah.
Well, anything else interesting? I can't remember the last time we podded.
It was last Friday when we did the Sailor Moon episode.
Oh, dang. All right, that was not long ago. Yeah, and that one left me hated. Still a bit heated about it, especially after looking through our message conversation and seeing all the ugly-ass screenshots because they fucking failed.
Yeah.
But
it's crazy, though, because we're in the end game now of the year where we're, like, getting really close. We have only 3 months left of the year. We're going to hit 200 episodes before the end of the season, and we're getting right close to our year-end anime count, like anime rundown, which yeah. that's
there's a lot. Like there's still like I probably should watch a couple more. Well, I know like there's a bunch of them that are finishing up the seasons that are coming out currently, but the dub I'm still waiting on. So once those are out, I can watch all of those finally.
Yeah, because Slime's got like 2 episodes, I think, left. So.
And I think My Hero it's finished. The dub for the late season is finished. I just need to go watch it. And there's a couple other ones I was interested in seeing as well.
I wonder if Oshinoko is going to be done before the end of the year. I mean, I might add that one to the list.
Yeah, I'd like to get that one in too. I am excited about that one. But I have been, now that I've actually been using High Dive. Only thing I don't like about High Dive is like that.
It's UI as shit.
It's not great. Like, especially like if you leave off watching a series, it doesn't always remember where you leave off.
No, it doesn't very
So
often.
like I heavily have to rely on putting it into Mal, or I'll be bumming, or just remembering where I left off in the plot.
See, I have
Which
two
is
backups because I have my Annie list, and then I also still have Mal. I don't use Mal as religiously anymore, but I still kind of try to keep it updated just in case.
yeah. It's that's so, and like it's frustrating too because then when it does remember and it's like, all right, like you left off on this episode, and then you go to click it, and then it doesn't like continue playing the episodes. It only plays that last episode.
Or sometimes it does. It's weird.
Oh, it never has for me. So maybe it will, but currently it never has. And it's very annoying every time.
It's a very glitchy app. Like they've redone it a few times, and it still isn't great. But they have a great selection of shows on there, so it's kind of like you just gonna have to deal with it.
There are so many things on there too. Like I was looking through like the dubs, and there's so many things I didn't realize had dubs. Like the show I'm watching right now, I just never thought it had a dub. So I was like, when I saw it did, I was like, oh, like what? So
High Dive was literally like the company that would just dub shit that no one else would dub. Now Netflix is kind of starting to do a lot of that because Netflix has been dubbing shows that previously were never going to get dubbed. Like, I mean, I've mentioned it before, but Kimi ni Todoke, that fucking took like 10 years to get a dub.
Well, that one's kind of different though too. I feel like they dubbed it because they were continuing the series as well. Like they
Well,
made
it's partially
Netflix
that.
made the next season.
They funded it. They didn't.
Yeah.
Make it.
So that's why, but that's why. Like it's not. I don't think they would have just went back and redubbed it if they weren't going to continue the series.
It's also Kimi ni Todoke was published. The rights holders were Aniplex, and Aniplex fucking sucks. So it's like 50-50 if you're gonna get a dub, and good luck getting a physical release.
Yeah, or they might lose it. I'm pretty certain Shiki was Aniplex.
I have a strong. That's what happened to Full Metal Alchemist. I have a feeling a show I'm watching right now called Bakano also went through that.
Now I'm curious. Who
But
Shiki? Oh no, it was Funimation who dubbed
well, here's
it.
the thing: Aniplex didn't dub; they just holded their rights because Funny usually did a lot of Aniplex's dubs.
Yep, it was an Aniplex case because that's another one where the dub is just gone.
Yep, you can only get it via the really expensive DVD box sets.
Even then, I don't even know if this one had one.
No, it did because I saw it on Amazon once, but it was like stupidly expensive because it's out of print.
Yeah.
Or you can be like me watching Bakano and I'm using a bootleg because that's the only way to watch it right now.
Or you watch it on YouTube in a flipped upside down, small in the corner box. No.
At like 280p, like grainy, looks like shit. But yeah, that's
the
what
audio is but you can still watch it. Or you can just watch it subbed and just
deal with it. But I am a dub man, so I will scour the earth until just to get an option.
I say dub man. So yeah, that parody of the YMCA instead of young man, it's dub man.
Yeah,
and that's
but
what are you drinking?
I'm having one of these Monster the Beast alcoholic drinks.
Monster, really? I have to disown you. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, first off, it's a NASCAR sponsor, and I had to try it.
Okay.
But also, they're very interesting. They go down way too fast. That's all I will say.
Aren't you gonna ask me what I'm drinking?
I don't care what the water bottle facts are.
It's
Alex.
not water. Ask me what I'm drinking.
What are you drinking, Alex?
I am drinking a Dell's.
Oh, throwback. You haven't had one of those in a while.
No, it's different. Stop at the sign of the lemon, tangerine orange, sparkling citrus beverage. There's no alcohol. I'm not an alcoholic like someone. It's 12 fluid ounces. 355 milliliters. Let's see. There's no preservatives, no GMOs, no artificial colors. Enriched with vitamin C. It's kosher. It specifically says kosher. It is. There's a little lemonade holding hands on it. Look at that. Look at that. That's something. All right, Bill. Drum roll. Drum roll. You haven't heard this in a while. It's 150 calories. Oh, damn, that's a little lot. Oh well. One serving size per can. There's a lot of other shit. But hey, you turn that fucking music off. But anyways, facts. There's carbonated filtered water in it. Bill, I haven't had my moment in a while. Bill, everyone cares about my facts. You take that stupid ass banner down right now. You take it down. You take it down. Turn that fucking music off. You turn that music off and you take that fucking banner down. Take it
Are
down.
you gonna move on and get it over with?
I will rate my drink a 9 out of 10. It's very refreshing. I wish the calories weren't as high, but I do like it. It's very nice. I would get them again.
And on that note,
And it's
we should-
refreshing.
we'll
Oh,
move on to our. what?
oh, and there's 0 grams of protein.
No one cares.
Everyone cares about the protein, Bill.
Moving on to our topic, we're actually doing something that we haven't done in almost a year. We're throwing it back. Yeah, it's been almost a year since we did one of these. We're actually returning to 3 anime films. Now,
What? I thought we
those-
retired that series.
no, we just haven't had time to watch shit this year.
Yeah.
But anyways, so 3 anime films, for those who don't remember, is the sister series to Anime Swap, where rather than watch 2 anime series, we instead watch 3 anime films and then we discuss.
Yeah.
Like Anime Swap, the films don't have to correlate with each other. They also don't have to have a similar theme, and they don't all have to be standalone. They could be like based off of a series, or they could just be their own thing. So the way it works is we watch 3 movies and we'll kind of go over them in order and kind of give our thoughts on them. So for this one, the way I kind of saw this one was 2 of the films anyways were mostly catch up for us. They were 2 shows.
And
2
mustard.
Yeah. They were 2 movies that have been out for a while and we were gonna watch them, but we just haven't really had the time,
There's 3 movies that have been out for a while.
Yeah, but one of them we picked just for this. The other 2 were movies that were on our radar.
What? No, one of them was on my radar. I was planning on watching it regardless at some point.
Yeah.
Bill.
But regardless, we'll move on to going over the first of the movies we watched, and that was The Boy and the Heron.
Dun, dun, dun,
And for those who
yeah.
For those who don't know, Boy and the Heron was a 2023 anime film directed by Hayao Miyazaki in what is supposedly his final film. He said the same thing about The Wind Rises.
Yes.
But he came out of retirement to do one final film, The Boy and the Heron. Not gonna lie, I think Wind Rises was a better conclusion to his career as a director.
Agreed.
But I'm not gonna completely shit on this film because of that, because it's not a bad film, but I have things to say about it.
Yeah.
So to give a brief kind of plot synopsis, this film kind of takes place in like World War II era Japan, actually kind of similar to The Wind Rises, only instead of The Wind Rises being a very realistic film, this one is more mystical and fantastical.
Fantasy, yeah, there's definitely a lot of fantasy elements.
Yeah, and it follows a boy named Mahito Maki, so this film also has some really weird lore where essentially his mother had died in a I believe it was like one of the bombings, I think, at the time.
I'm assuming, I believe she was working in the hospital, because I remember they were saying it was like showing a hospital, and they were saying like his father and a bunch of people in their home were going, oh no, like something happened at the hospital, we gotta go. And he was trying to go to the hospital as well, but he couldn't. And I believe it shows, is it the first time it shows like the hallucination of his mom, like in the fire as well?
Yeah, and where she kind of just mysteriously she almost turns into like a phoenix in the air and then rises and disappears.
Yeah.
But but then it cuts to him now where he's kind of like in a car with his father, and they're kind of moving to their destination. It's implied that he's kind of been away for a while, and he's finally rejoining his family who have been living kind of away from all the craziness going on.
They were living in Tokyo when
Yes.
everything happened, and then they moved to the countryside after everything happened.
Yes, and I'm assuming that this is just kind of a guess, but I'm guessing if we're going by history, this was around the point where, like, after they had attacked Pearl Harbor, so like the U.S. was doing like the bombing raids on Tokyo at the time.
I'm gonna assume yes.
That's my guess.
With the real world timeline, then yes.
This film's timeline is very vague. It's implied to be during World War II era Japan, but it's not very deep into that because, let's face it, that's actually kind of a very basic minor element of this film story.
Yeah, it's more based around the relationship
of the characters themselves.
Yeah. Mahito and his aunt and his mother specifically.
His aunt mother.
His aunt mother and also just his mother.
Yeah. So when he's being basically taken to the place where his father's currently living, it's revealed that his father had remarried his aunt, who was his previous wife's sister.
Hence the aunt mother.
Which is, I guess, a thing that just happens. It sounded weird when I first read it, but then I was like, yeah, I guess it's a thing.
Yeah, it is a weird kind of.
Well, especially the way they imply it is, it's like she looks identical to her sister, and it's like, look, I got remarried to a woman who looks identical to your mom. It's like, that's just weird on so many levels. And she's already pregnant with your younger sibling.
Yep. So too bad.
I will admit though, the mother character, what was her name? Natsuko.
Natsuko, yeah.
Very likable character. Like, she's trying.
She's trying, but she's also not pushing it.
No, she's
not being like we have to be a family. She's kind of letting him go at his own pace, which I guess is kind of nice because, he's going through probably one of the hardest things in his life.
Yeah. But they end up getting to their new home that they'll be staying in, and they're immediately, like, as they're walking through the house, like a herring like flies by, and they imply like that's strange how it's never been that close before.
Yeah.
And
the heron's acting a little weird, a little sus.
Yeah. And they proceed to go through kind of life. Like, he ends up going to his first day of school, and
it doesn't go well.
Yeah, it goes very bad. He's treated like an outsider and gets into a fight immediately. So what he does is he bashes his head in with a rock, so he doesn't have to go to school the next day.
Yep.
Yeah, that scene was very interesting to me because it was like, wow, like he just went
right in. It was very
in.
unexpected too. We were both just like when he went and grabbed the rock, we weren't expecting it to, like, his head to just start gushing blood.
He fucking right in the side of his head, and it's just like face is covered in blood. I was like, holy fuck.
Yeah. And then we also forgot to talk about all of the elderly maids.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of elderly maids that kind of just live around the house, and they kind of just help. And
they're all the hottest characters in this film.
Oh yeah.
We can't deny it. They're sexy.
They have multiple faces, like they have forehead faces, like it's great.
Yes.
I do. There is one that sticks out above the rest because she's kind of a smart ass for the entire time. What was her name again? That was Hikaru, I believe.
Yeah.
I liked her. She was kind of a sarcastic ass the entire time.
And she became a pretty good supporting character later on as well.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is eventually, like, he keeps seeing the herring, like, kind of flying around, and the herring, you immediately find out this herring's fucking weird because it has fucking teeth.
Yeah. And it talks.
Yeah, and it talks and shits in his room. Alex died so hard during this scene because there was
okay, he was in his bed, and then the herring came in the window, and then, like, the herring was talking to him, and then the herring proceeded to turn around. So during the movie, I made a big old fart noise, implying that it was gonna shit on shit, and then lo and behold, it flies guess what's below the window? Just
Just
bunch
big
of
pile of
shit.
shit all over the windowsill.
And it was just so funny. And also, I mean, we called the herring Robert Pattinson
Well,
the whole movie.
we called the herring Robert the entire film because he's very famously voiced by Robert Patterson.
Which he did a good job.
He does a phenomenal job in the role, but the whole time, because the herring is literally just called the gray heron, he doesn't have a name. We literally just called him Robert the entire film.
Robert, no.
But it kind of keeps going through its paces. Like he ends up trying to build like a weapon to face off against this herring because the herring is basically just harassing him now. The herring has a straight up human face in its beak. It's fucking weird.
Well, it gets revealed later on.
But
it's the Birdman.
Eventually one day, like he sees his stepmother just kind of wandering off into the woods. And he's like, that's strange, but he doesn't really do anything about it until the maids are all like, we can't find the mistress of the house anywhere. Like, where did she go? And he explains that she went off into the forest.
Yep.
So then, of course, Mahito and Kikoro have to go. He basically just takes Kikoro with him.
Yeah.
And they end up in the tower where they eventually run into Robert. We're going to call him Robert for the rest of this, by the way.
Robert. Yes.
And they end up crippling Robert because they have his like extra feather.
Yes,
he used it to make
the arrow.
And it ends up putting a hole in his beak, which cripples him and makes it so he can't fly anymore.
Yep. And it's just this weird humanoid bird thing.
Birdman thing, like kind of like short, fat, like guy with giant nose, and he's very, very indignant about the fact that he's basically been crippled.
Yep.
But what eventually ends up happening is he wants to know where Natsuko is, and essentially what happens is the guy who like runs the tower, who's played by Mark Hamill, the grand uncle, he essentially is like he's like be his guide on this journey he's about to go on, and they get sucked into the floor, and he ends up in like Fantasyland.
Yes.
Where he ends up eventually running into this older, younger, I guess middle-aged like woman who's like a pirate kind of sailing.
Well, she ends up saving him from the pelicans.
Yeah, the evil pelicans who tried sending him through like the evil doorway of death. The gates of death, I guess it was supposed to be an implication of.
Yes.
And what ends up going through is he ends up kind of joining her on her tasks because she's part of like this like group where she gathers food for these like little creatures known as the Warararas, I think.
Yeah.
They were the most sinister. They're the most sinister characters in the movie.
They were cute and adorable. If you think they're sinister, you're crazy.
This was my running joke during the movie.
The main parakeets were more sinister.
They were just looking for food. Willem Dafoe was like the nicest character in this movie. He was the noble pelican who died like right after he appeared. It's also pretty much implied that the lady that he's working with is actually a younger version of Kikoro who has been missing this entire time.
Yes.
But eventually he resolves this plot thread and moves on to his next journey. But before he leaves, the older Kikoro gives him a little statue of the younger Kikoro to hold on to because it might be important later.
Well, and before the Birdman dies too, you do run into the new character also, the young
Lady Hime,
who has pyrokinetic powers.
She's a firebender essentially.
Yes, but she saved the Warawara from the pelicans.
The ones that she didn't burn to death in the process.
Yeah, well, that's how she saved them. She burned them. But they meet before that, too.
But he ends up going on to his next area, which I believe is... he meets up again with Robert. And they end up fixing Robert's beak so Robert can fly again.
Yes.
And they eventually start this plan to go to where... Natsuko is, and he has to go through this tower filled with parakeets, and the parakeets are all like axe-wielding murderers in this world.
They eat humans.
Yes, they do. Like, there's a great scene of them like gutting like what is assumed to be a human, and there's just a bucket full of bones and guts in the corner. It's wonderful.
Yep.
I will say though, the whole time the animation in this film is beautiful. Like it's definitely a Miyazaki film.
Yeah. No, everything is great.
It's definitely digitally done, but it has a lot of that traditional style that his films have.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, eventually he gets through and he gets kidnapped by the. Uh, no, he doesn't get kidnapped by the
No,
parakeets.
no,
He
it's
gets.
so at the beginning when they're trying to infiltrate, Himi ends up saving him. And Himi ends up kind of guiding him through the tower.
Mhm.
And at one point through the tower they actually find a door that returns him to home, but he actually makes the choice to instead stay rather than go, because at this point like everyone back at home is like freaking out trying to find him
Oh
and
yeah,
his
because we get the
stepmom.
great scene where they go through the door, but they hold on to it so it doesn't disappear forever. And his dad comes up to see him, just as like a horde of the parakeets like come through. And
Yes.
what's funny is because the way the worlds are, when the parakeets enter the real world, they turn into regular parakeets. And
Yes.
because the sequence is so quick, his father actually thinks that he turned into a parakeet.
Yep.
And they all proceed to shit on him because holy fuck, there's a lot of parakeets
There,
shitting everywhere in
there,
this
there's
film.
a lot of shit in general in this film, is what we realize. But anyway, so after that, he ends up kind of going back in, and but that's when they end up getting into some altercation where Himi gets hurt and gets kidnapped by the parakeets, but Mahito is able to escape.
Well, what happens is they encounter they find where um his stepmother is, the
Yes, that's it.
Natsuko. And what happens is they get to her, but she like basically like refuses to let him near her because it's basically implied that she's hurt that he won't accept her as his mother.
Yeah.
It's kind of a symbolic thing, and she's essentially basically pushing him away now. Because I'm assuming her negative traits are being pushed out because of this weird like area she's in.
Yes.
But what happens is eventually he ends up getting forced out of there, and the two of them get knocked out, and they both get tied up. But Mahito gets saved by Robert, of course,
Robert.
and they proceed to begin their escape. Where there's also a lot of weird dream sequences that happen in this. Like he ends up meeting the granduncle in a dream, and
Yeah.
the granduncle proceeds to explain how he's the successor. He wants him to be his permanent successor because the world that he keeps creating is full of negative emotions, and it's a constant cycle.
I will say, I just going at it now too, and even just like going back and re-talking about it, I had a hard time following the plot of this film.
It
Like I
is
kept having to it's definitely one I feel like you need to rewatch to truly
it's
get it.
you know what this film reminded me a lot of? It's up there with like Castle in the Sky and Princess
Yeah.
Mononoke, where like those plots were very all over the place to me.
Yeah.
Like there was a bigger, deeper meaning he was trying to convey, which I respect, but at the same time, it's not the most digestible film on a first time watch.
Yeah, I feel like it's one I need to rewatch to get a better perspective of. But just as we're recapping it, I'm just like, you know what? Like, I don't fucking know what the story is. Like, it's fucking big old Birdman. Birdman
Yeah,
and
it's
and the
this is
Wizard
the
Man
most
and the blocks, and then the parakeets want the power. Dave Batista's there for some reason.
yeah, Dave Batista's the parakeet king,
Like,
who
as we're saying it, I'm like, what the fuck is this movie? Like,
no, it
sorry.
is very all over the place, and it's sad because I didn't hate it, but the whole time I was like, I have no fuck. Like
Like,
Miyazaki was trying to say something here. I'm just not sure. He almost got like Hideo Kojima levels of abstract at times.
yeah, like as we're recapping it, I'm like, the more and more I'm just like, like I kind of want to lower my score. I think I gave it a 7, but I kind of want to give it a 6 now. Like, it's just, I
Yeah,
don't know. Like, I don't know.
yeah, but
I
it's
just feel like there's way better Miyazaki films than
no,
this.
there really is. Like I said it before, like this isn't my least favorite, but it's also like not in my top 5 by any means.
Yeah.
Like I still like this more than Castle in the Sky. even Princess Mononoke, I know that's sacrilege to some people.
No, I'd agree. For our opinions, yes.
My thing with Princess Mononoke wasn't that it was bad. I think it was just too long.
Too long and like I don't know. For me, it was the gore factor.
Yeah, there was a lot of
Like
gore. This one, the most.
and it's like weird because like I know like I've watched gory things before and like I'm usually fine with it, but I feel like the fact that it was a Ghibli film was just like really throwing me off and I really didn't like it. But
Yeah, that one he
anyways,
was very much. That one's similar to this one. He was trying to tell us something very, very deep.
yeah. Anyways, getting back on track.
Basically, the final climax is they end up finally they're basically going after Lady Hime, who's been she's been kidnapped by the Pelican King and given to the granduncle. And the granduncle and the Pelican King have like this chat about the future, but the Pelican King doesn't trust him at all, and he kind of sneaks
Yeah.
around as Mahito
Not
and Robert,
Pelican King, Parakeet King.
whatever, Birdman.
There's too many birds. Dave Bautista. Just say
Dave
Dave.
Bautista. Yeah.
Dave Bautista.
Also, I love the scene when they walk into that castle and there's just all the parakeets in the background with the signs, and one of them just says Dutch on it for some reason.
No, there was a bunch of them with Dutch.
Yeah,
The
I don't know
whole
if
crowd had Dutch signs.
Yeah, I don't know if that's another allegory that we're that's too like deep for us to get or something, but yeah. Anyway, so he kind of hangs back as Mahito and Robert end up getting into the area where with the granduncle, and there's this great scene of them slowly getting closer and closer with Dave Bautista chilling in the background. I'm just gonna call him that now for the rest of this, by the way.
Yes, please.
Chilling in the background, getting closer and closer, and they don't fucking notice him, even though he's right up their ass.
He's like, I'm here. You can't see me, man.
And the climax for this film is so absurd to me, where like he has this big deep talk with the granduncle, where he's basically like, we need to save the world and do this thing. Like, I need you to, even if you don't accept my offer, I need you to at least make one tower that'll be perfect and stand forever. And they kind of
Batista fucks everything up.
They dilly dally for like 5 minutes, and then he runs. The Parakeet King literally runs up and just like makes this haphazard tower like right there. He's like, "Stand."
Well, he's also like, "You're gonna leave the hands of fate into this child. Fuck that! I'm making my own tower."
Yeah, he makes this he makes this haphazard tower that immediately starts to fall over, and rather than just make another tower, he just fucking cuts the entire table in half.
Yeah.
And proceeds to destroy like the giant floating spaceship rock thing in the background that's very deep apparently. And it just causes this entire world to fucking devolve into chaos.
Yep.
And then it ends up being a chase out where they're all having to escape. And
yeah, well, the world is basically collapsing. Like the world's gonna be no more.
Yeah, but the final climax ends up being they end up getting back to the Hall of Doors, and they reunite with Natsuko and like everybody, and basically they make their final goodbyes, where it then is revealed that Lady Hime, who, let's face it, if you were paying enough attention, you could understand right away that Lady Hime is actually an alternate universe version of Mahito's mother.
Well, it's not alternate universe; it's her past self.
Well, it's weirdly
her younger self.
Yeah, but it's implied that they're like different worlds at the same time. The way I read into it, it was weird.
Well, no, I thought it was like that because at one point they tell the story of like of how her mom went into like disappeared for a year and then came back. Well, disappeared for like a few years and then came back fine with like hadn't aged at all, which is what it was basically saying. So I think it was her past. I'm not sure. It could have been both. I was taking it as her past self because it was just like Kiriko's. I don't know. It was confusing. I mean, they did have a good goodbye moment though, of like like when she was like, "I can't wait, like I'm for you to be my son," which was like a nice note.
It was just one of those weird like, it's too deep for my brain. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, and then
but they eventually end up going back to their designated door with like the main world where everything was going on. Yep. And of course, a shit ton of parakeets also come with them,
including the king, including Dave.
Well, he's just a bird now at this point.
He's Bird Batista.
pretty much. And then this is like the most what the fuck scene is like they're all through the door and they're just like because they've
Getting
accepted
shit on by the
yeah
parakeets.
like the parakeets are just flying all over Natsuka and Mahito and Robert and they're just laughing as these birds just shit all over them.
The amount of poop jokes made while watching this is pretty hilarious, and how some of them were unironically made, and then like it just happened to be shit everywhere.
Yeah.
Oh,
But then of course like the whole time like Robert's like, so you forgot everything in there, right? He's like, no. Mahito's like, no, I remember everything. He's like, you shouldn't be able to. He's like, did you bring anything through that you weren't supposed to? And he's like, oh, I have these 2 rocks. What he has one of the stones,
yeah,
and then the little figure of Kikuro.
yeah,
And
which turns back into Kikuro.
well, first Robert goes, he's like, well, they're not that powerful, so you should eventually forget anyways, and just kind of lets it go. But then, like, as they're like they reunite with the dad, suddenly Kikuro just like grows out of his pocket because she was the doll the whole time.
Yeah,
And nobody questions it. They're just like, whatever.
yeah.
And then the film has a hard cut, and then it does a time skip, and then it shows them after the war, I'm presuming, where they're heading back to Tokyo, and it shows the his newborn his like toddler little brother down at the stairs with the whole family as they leave for their next adventure. And then the film literally just cuts the credits and it's just over.
Yeah. The ending did feel a bit abrupt too. And I know like he usually does like those
abrupt endings like that, but
it just like didn't feel I don't know, it didn't feel finished to me. It was just like, oh okay, it's bye. See ya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to dump on this film that much, but the whole time I was kind of like, I feel like this film didn't need to be made.
No, I don't think so.
I feel like Miyazaki just wanted to make one more film and he just kind of had to. So he threw this one together.
And he heard the voice of Robert Pattinson and he said, you know what? That sounds like a heron to me.
I mean, to be fair,
vampire boy.
To be fair, he was the most interesting character in the movie.
No, yeah. But honestly though, I kind of wish there was more. Like, the title of the movie is The Boy and the Heron, but I feel like they didn't interact as much as they should have, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like there could have been way more.
Yeah, if anything, he interacts with, like, Lady Hime and, like, Kikuro more than he does with Robert throughout the movie.
Like, it's just, like, reflecting on... I mean, I guess you guys can... We'll do a reflection of all 3 at the end, but definitely not the worst Ghibli film I've seen, but not I would not say it was his best.
The way I put it is like my least favorite is Castle in the Sky, which I know some people love that film. The reason I dislike Castle in the Sky is because I just thought it was boring.
Yeah.
Like the only redeemable part of that film to me was the fact that Mark Hamill is a fucking really good villain.
Yeah. He was excellent.
This movie had entertaining moments. It was just such a convoluted mess to me that's what holds it back.
It was I think too the fact that it was so hard to follow what was going on at times that like the enjoyment factor just went down.
Yeah.
Because you were just trying to be like, okay, this happened, but this also, like you almost had to take notes.
See, and what got me the most was the fact that it takes place in like a real world setting, but then it keeps going back to the mystical world. They just didn't clash well together.
The mystical world, but also the dreams as well.
Yeah,
it was just like this world, the dream world, the current world. Like,
I mean, I know I keep comparing it to Wind Rises because Wind Rises was a movie that
was his last film. You know,
it was his last film, but Wind Rises also just hit me in a way that like I still think about that movie from time to time.
Yeah.
In like a retrospective kind of way. Like that was a deep movie that was like understandable. Like even that movie had the weird fantasy dream sequences, but at least those made sense in the context of like what was going on. This is just this felt abstract to be abstract at times.
Yeah. Like I almost feel like I don't want to say he was trying too hard to make some. It almost feels like it was like I'm trying. Like Wind Rises was effortless. Spirited Away was effortless. Like it was just a excellent story, excellent
the,
characters and everything.
the
This
way
one, it just
I
felt like he was really
yeah,
trying. Like, yeah, the boy and the heron. Like, yeah, like it felt forced. I guess you could say. Like,
the way I kind of looked at it was when we watched all the previous Ghibli films, we were dead serious watching these movies because we were very
yeah,
into them. This one, we were cracking jokes the entire time because it
yeah,
was, we were just so like, it was so hard to follow that the only way we could get any enjoyment out of it was being shitheads the entire
rubber.
time. But it
Yeah,
also, to me, like, it didn't really have a care. Like, the reason I'm so endeared to like Robert the Herring is because he's really the only character in this movie that I really cared about going through it. Like
yeah,
everyone
because
else,
even Mahito, the main character, I was like, he like when he bashed his head with the rock, I was like, why you do that, you idiot? Like,
he was just like the guy from Castle in the Sky. Like I did not give a shit about that character throughout the
yeah,
film.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's unfortunate. We'll save our rankings for the end because next I want to transfer into what I think was a pleasant surprise. I mean, it wasn't a movie that I thought was going to be bad by any means, but like it was one of those movies that I was expecting to be good, but I wasn't expecting to be this good.
yeah.
And
Agreed.
that film is Suzume,
Yeah,
the most recent film by Makoto Shinkai, the same guy that brought us Your Name, Weathering with You, a bunch of other films I still have to watch at this point, but
yes.
like I'm
But
basing
most
it off
people
of
know Your Name.
Your Name and Weathering with You. What I also find very interesting is this film came out right before Boy and the Herring, so they kind of got like kind of clashed a bit in terms of like audience
Yes.
retention, which I think is a little unfair because I don't know which one did better, to be perfectly honest. I'd have to look into it, but I know that
Mm,
there was a bit of a clash there.
well, this one did 316.8
16,
million in the box office. So
yes.
let me just see what The Boy and the Heron did as a comparison. It did. Oh, it actually did better than The Boy and the Heron. Boy and the
Oh,
Heron only made 294.2 million.
interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
So
I
in
guess
terms
because
of, yeah,
I guess it's because honestly, Shinkai is like the modern Miyazaki lately. Like his films have been just so fucking good.
I almost wonder if that's why they were pushing out Miyazaki because I mean, and we're going to talk about another movie today too, but like there are just so many people coming out with movies. I mean, Netflix is making movies, which is the next one we're going to talk about, and they're good. They're good movies. Like they're
Hmm.
great stories and like Ghibli's not the only competitor anymore.
No,
Like,
I mean, because back in the day, his only real competitor to me was like Satoshi Kon, and tragically, Satoshi Kon passed away so long ago, and he only got to make 4 films. But he was like, I used to always say, Satoshi Kon was like he was like the Don Bluth to Miyazaki's Walt Disney in a lot of ways.
yeah.
Like his
It
movies
did
were a lot edgier.
Suzume did lose to The Boy and the Heron in some award nominations, but I not to be mean, but I kind of feel like they won because of the Miyazaki name. Like
Yeah.
I do not think that was a great movie. I don't really
No,
think this
it was
one
like
deserved the awards a lot more.
it was a fine movie, but it was just fine.
I don't. Let's just say like in terms of rewatching, I would not rewatch The Boy and the Heron.
No, like it's like I said, it's not even in my top 5 Ghibli films.
Suzume,
Like
I would rewatch this probably tomorrow.
I actually have the first volume of the manga pre-ordered. I like this movie that much.
Yeah, I was thinking about it too, honestly. But let's get into the plot of this one, I guess, so we can kind of give the brief synopsis. But as the title, the name is centered around Suzume, a
Which I
17-year-old
found
high school girl.
I found this very interesting that he named the movie after the main character this time around.
Yeah.
Also, I like the fact that like so in the previous 2 films he's done, he's had 2 characters, a male and a female, who have been kind of like they kind of share the spotlight to a degree.
Hmm.
This one flat out like Suzume, she's the lead of this film.
Hmm.
There is supporting characters throughout that are very also important, but Suzume is like the center focus, which I found
Yeah.
very refreshing because there were points in the previous his other two films where I felt like there would be points where either the female or the male lead would get kind of pushed out, and they kind of fought for who was like the lead of the film.
No, she was the lead. Um,
Also, a little backstory. I was reading into this. Apparently, Shinkai initially for this film, he wanted it to be a. He actually wanted the story to be a Yuri romance.
oh, really?
Yeah, he wanted it to be two girls. But the directors, they basically said, from what I read, it was essentially they vetoed it and basically said they don't. You got to remember, this is Japan. Japan very behind on the times when it comes to a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They basically said they didn't think it was time for a movie this big, like budget wise and prominence wise, to have that kind of theme.
Honestly, though, I don't think it would have changed much because,
no, well,
in all honesty, like
you can kind of see elements of it left
well,
behind.
Well, also like Sota could, be kind of a androgynous character.
Well,
You know,
that's his reason. That's
Yeah.
his reasoning why Sota becomes the chair, is because he was like, Shinkai's response was like, fine, if I can't do the thing I want to do, I'm going to make it as absurd as possible.
And honestly, it was great.
It was great too. Honestly, like I would have been indifferent either way. Like I wouldn't have cared if they had gone with his original direction or the direction it has. That being said, I like the romance aspect of the film.
I don't think it would have really made that much of a difference if
no, it really
it was
wouldn't.
a girl or a boy. I really don't, because truthfully, it was like honestly, like into like the love, like yes, it was a driving factor of the story, but it was not the main story. Like
No.
a lot of it was just centered around Suzume and her relationships, not just with Sota, the other characters, but with her stepmom, with her, her mom who was her stepmom, who was your aunt, her parents that she lost tragically,
It was like a coming of age adventure story more than anything.
Yeah.
Because unlike Your Name, which Your Name is a full on romance, and your Name does it very well. Weathering with You felt a little forced in the romance department. I still love Weathering with You as a film, but the romance aspect of that film was a little.
Yeah.
He was trying a little harder with that one to make it more prominent. This film, there's a romance subplot, but it's such a minor thing. Like it doesn't even really come up until right at the end.
No, yeah. And it's more honestly, it probably didn't even need to be a romance. Like it probably could have even just been a friendship.
But the thing is, too, the romance feels natural. Like you kind of understand why it happens. It doesn't feel like it doesn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah. No, it was definitely. I mean, I think you guys can already tell that we enjoyed this film so much more than The Boy and the Heron. But I guess like to get started, we already talked about sort of centered around Suzume in Japan 2023. And then this world is centered in the same universe, so they've all been affected by what happened in Your Name.
Tokyo's already been hit by a meteorite. It got flooded, and now we have giant space worm about to cause earthquake.
Yes. But her first, like one of the first big moments in the film is actually she interacts with this young man, who ends up being Sota, and he asks her about an abandoned onsen or abandoned resort or something abandoned nearby.
He was looking for ruins, essentially.
Yeah, and she points him where it is, but being kind of the kind person she is, she's like a little worried about him going there without knowing everyone, because it's basically an abandoned land due to the natural acts, like the earthquakes and other stuff that happened before. So she ends up going back to find him. But when she gets there, she discovers a door frame standing on its own, which the door ends up being something very, very important. And she opens it to see like this field of stars and this basically like this other world. She tries to open it and she can't go into it. So she ends up closing it. She can't go into it. But she ends up tripping over this little cat statue. And then when she looks at it, she goes, huh? She picks it up, and then suddenly the statue turns into a real cat.
And runs off.
Yes.
And she thinks nothing of it, other than she's like, that was fucking weird. Also,
she's like, I'm late to school. I gotta go to school.
We also get a bit of her backstory in that scene though, where she looks into the door because it's implied it's basically revealed that her mother had died in I actually was reading into it. It was implied to be the Japanese like tsunami from the that hit in 2011
Oh, yep.
because she was actually a nurse and she died in the hospital during the tsunami, which I just realized now both of the films we covered have to do with the main character who lost their mother to a natural disaster,
Yes. And
which
the
is kind
aunt's
of
involved.
and yeah, although different. Well, actually, in the same context, that they're both mother figures.
Yeah.
That's really weird now that I think about it.
I know. I was thinking about that too, and I was like,
But
huh.
this movie handles it so much better.
Well, and I just like I love the relation. Like it's very good. We'll talk
Well,
about it later on.
also, like right off the bat, like even before we get into a lot of her interactions, you are immediately endeared to Suzume as a character. She is so likable.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
she
and
is such a
she's like
mood.
she's and she's not just like she's not a perfect character. Like she's just a very real person. Like she's a person that you would see. She's not this idealistic, perfect, pure character. Like she's a person that like we're all like sometimes, which I felt was also very endearing. But
Well,
she ends up going back to
I like the scene where early on where she's like at the house talking to her aunt and she's all like, "Hey, I'm going out." And she's like, "Oh, I've got stuff to do late tonight." And she's like, "Oh, you got a date?" And the aunt's like, "No, no, I got to work." And she's like, "I don't care if it's a date. You could totally go on a date."
oh
Which is kind of implied, which comes up later. It's a very important detail, but
yeah. But when she goes back to the school after fleeing from the area, she ends up seeing like a cloud of smoke, and then she keeps pointing it out to her classmates, but she quickly realizes she's the only one that could see the smoke. And
hmm.
then with the smoke follows an earthquake, and this is kind of going to be a trend. Uh, and then she ends up basically running to try and figure out where the smoke is coming from because she realized, oh, it's from that place I just was earlier. Shit, did I mess something up? So she's going to go and find it, which she ends up running into Sota, um, and ends up helping him also along the way because we end up being revealed that Sota is what is
Closer.
known as a closer. He has to find doors that lead to that other world and basically lock them because of these supernatural, powerful worm beings that are
That
causing
are
the earthquakes and natural
Yeah.
disasters.
I love Shinkai films because they are so realistic, but at the same time they have these insane like supernatural elements to them that are just so absurd, but they make sense in the context of his stories.
Sorry, Miss Pooh was sleeping and in deep sleep, and she was twitching, and then she banged her head on the chair.
Well, it didn't do any damage, so
Well, yeah, there's nothing in there, but I just was like, "Are you okay? Did she get woken up?" She looks pissed. Um, but she ends up taking him back to her place.
because he
Um,
got injured during the when they were trying to shut the door to close on the
yes,
worm.
and she feels a little guilty because she kind of realized they quickly realized that it was
Her fault.
yeah, because she basically took when she took out the little cat sculpture, he ends up revealing that the cat sculpture was known as the Keystone. And then as they're chatting, the cat that had disappeared ends up appearing again, and it's just like, "Hey, Suzume!" And the cat loves Suzume. Oh, I can't.
Well, what happens? So what happens is the cat is all kind of scruffy and like looks weak. So Suzume feeds it and she's all like praising it, and the cat then proceeds to talk and goes, "Suzume, me and Suzume friends." And then it turns over and looks at Sota and just goes, "You're in the way." And then just immediately it goes to a
puts a
cut,
curse on him. Yeah.
and he becomes the chair
Yes.
that he was sitting on. Well, she was giving him first aid,
Yes.
and that chair has deeper plot relevance than it first appears, but it's essentially a
Well,
little
and another thing too that that Daijin, and I mean, spoiler warning. We already spoiled the whole Boy and the Heron, but just in case, spoiler warning. Um, when she curses Sota, she curses him also to become basically he's the next keystone. Like Daijin is no longer going to be the keystone. Sota's the keystone now. And it's something that he didn't realize in the beginning, but he slowly will realize as the story goes on.
Well, yeah, because there'll be scenes where he'll go to sleep, and then it'll take him a few minutes to wake up. And we find out
like
later
kind
that's
of seen with like ice, like almost like ice creeping up him, and he's like almost frozen.
What's crazy is though, like the whole time, like Daijin, that's what the cat ends up being named. He is basically, he thinks he's gonna like this whole thing's gonna end up getting him in Suzume's favor because he wants to be Suzume's companion.
Yes.
He doesn't realize though that like
which I think a lot of it is because Suzume freed them, you know.
Freed him and then fed him and was very nice to him.
Yeah.
What happens though is basically he basically runs off and he's kind of progressively opening all of the different doors.
Well, no. So he wasn't doing that. So that's what they. So at first, that's what they think. So what ends up happening is right after he's basically cursed into a chair. Of course, that door ends up, or a different door ends up opening up. I think it was a different one.
Well, this is after they go on the crazy wild chase, and she ends up on the boat.
Yes, so they end up actually taking the ferry across the boat. They're trying to catch Daijin, but it's not working. And then eventually another door appears, and Sota basically tries to do it on his own, but then quickly realizes, I'm a chair. I can't close the door. I am a chair. So she ends up having to claim the chair. And basically, for the next part of the journey, it actually takes place of her traveling to a place to basically take on Sota's role as a closer and close the doors. What they think is happening is that they think that Daijin is opening the doors, but it's not. Daijin is actually leading them to the next doors that are going to open.
Right.
But at first, they keep blaming poor Daijin. Daijin's just trying to help.
I did not feel bad for Daijin at all.
I did. I loved little Daijin. I was so sad when he was all like unhappy.
It was his own fault.
No.
He did it to himself.
No, he didn't. All he wanted was to just be a cat.
He could have read the room. Could have read the room.
How would you feel if you were stuck being a little keystone for your whole life? You wouldn't like it so much. You wouldn't. So stop being mean to poor Daijin.
By ruining someone else's life.
Shut up. But what ends up happening is on her adventures to basically close these doors,
she runs into a whole bunch of different cats and characters.
Which they are all so lovable and so great. Like
the first one she runs into is Chica, the orange salesman.
And what we determined is that all friends named Chica are great in animes. And maybe in real life. I haven't met a real Chica, but maybe if I do someday, they'll be great. The first they meet Chica, and then she ends up hitchhiking, which don't do, people, but in this case it worked out, with a nice lady named Rumi and her 2 kids. She ends up having to babysit the kids, but then also helps out at the bar.
That same thing though happens with Chica, where she goes to Chica's family who run an inn, and she gets to stay at the inn if she helps out, which is really nice. And I love the scenes where like they're talking about boys, and like they get sent to go clean the bathroom because no one wants to listen to that.
And they're still talking to also just to help out and stuff.
Well, yeah, but they send them there just so they won't have to listen to them yap, which is great.
Yep. Then the next lady, which I already kind of talked about, and then who was the last person?
Well, what happens is she goes from I love that part too, is like each of them like kind of understands her journey, and she like kind of like.
Well, they're all kind of thinking for the most part that, and a part I think really is true, that she's kind of going on an adventure, being a runaway, kind of doing her own thing, but also, like, because her relationship with her aunt is complicated, because at one point, like, she's so grateful for her aunt for taking her in, but at the same time, like, she also wants her aunt to have her own life, and she also doesn't want to be smothered at the same time. So it's complicated,
Well, that's also the whole plot thing, is like the aunt is constantly like messaging her like, where the fuck are you? Because she's going on this insane trip across Japan. And what's great too is another thing that kind of isn't as apparent, but you notice it the more you actually read into it. her relationship with Soda is actually growing here more and more because
Yes.
she'll chat with him like when they're alone, even though he's a chair.
Yeah.
And like they constantly get all these different like things. Like there's also like the great scene where she's playing with the kids who like she can't handle the children at all. But then like she uses Soda as a way to like play with them, and then he reveals himself, but the kids are so young they don't get it. So they
Yeah.
just think
They're
he's
like, oh, it's a toy.
created with AI. That was a good
Yes.
joke.
That
My
was a
favorite
good
though is like they're sitting on him and like riding around. She's like, "Ooh, I want to go for a ride." He's like, "Don't even think about it."
She gets one later on. What? She sits on the chair.
That's the way. Never mind.
Oh, ew! Get your mind out of the gutter.
The way you said it, I was like, Alex.
Weird. You made it weird. You're a freaking weirdo. Anyways, so after that, but then eventually their next stop is well,
they get to
their next stop
Tokyo
is
because
go to
they want to
Tokyo.
stop at his apartment because he needs to find out something about the next location or something.
Well, they want to do that, but it's also because like he knows that there's two keystones. There's two keystones which are kind of the symbolic yin and yang that balance the world. And he knows that one is in Tokyo. So that's also why they were going that way regardless. But he wanted to go back to his apartment to get some information. Also, they end up talking about how his grandfather is in Japan. And then they meet his friend, who his friend says he owes him money, but in fact, he owes he owes Sota money instead, which is pretty funny. And he ends up being a pretty good supporting character, but he's pretty
What
pissed
ends up
that he
happening though
misses his
is
teacher exam.
yeah. What ends up happening though is the main worm comes out of the main door in Tokyo.
Yeah.
And basically it's gotten to the point where the other keystone can't hold it anymore, and this thing is basically out and it's going to be really bad.
And it's also the door that it comes out of is like impossible to close because it's like coming out of like a subway tunnel.
Well, it's deeper down, like farther down underground.
But at
like
first, that's what it looks like, and it kind of to them looks like there's nothing they can do.
What's crazy though is like Soda then like Soda has this like tendency to just like ditch Suzume because he doesn't want to get hurt, but he also forgets I'm a chair.
Yes.
So he ends up jumping into the worm to get to the top of it to try and stop it. And we get one of the most ridiculous but greatest scenes in this anime where then Suzume jumps after him, but no one can see the actual
no one can
worm.
see the worms and stuff happening.
She straight up jumps into the air and then just flies into the air, and it's the most absurd thing ever. But eventually she gets up to the top of it and they run into Daijin again. And essentially Daijin's implies there's no way to stop it now. It's going to break the earth.
Well, the only way to stop it is with the keystone. And at first there's that bit of arguing. It's like you have to be the keystone, but then Daijin's like, you don't get it. I'm not the keystone anymore.
Yeah, and basically tells Soda that he is the keystone, and Soda then basically just gives up and he accepts his fate and becomes the keystone permanently.
Yeah. Well, but it's also a really touching moment between Suzume and Soda because Suzume is like, no, like we have to find another way. Like we can't, like I can't lose you. And then Sota is like, no, like it's the only way. Like the only way we're gonna stop this is with me as the keystone. And it's like very sad.
It literally ends up being they argue back and forth, and they end up basically Soda gives up and Suzume continues to be in disbelief, and she won't allow him to accept. She basically won't accept it until literally she runs out of time and she's forced to use him as the keystone to stop the world from getting destroyed.
Yeah.
And then she proceeds to fall down, but gets saved by Daijin. And they actually end up where she ends up is at the door, where the worm came from.
Which is where she can then see Sota as the
on top of
Mount Fuji,
this amplified Mount Fuji in this other world.
Yep.
And she shuts the door, seals it, and then Daijin's like, "Isn't it great? We get to be friends now forever." And she basically tells him like, Do you realize what the fuck you've done?
Yeah, and then poor little Daijin went from being a little healthy cat to a little sad cat, and Bill was like, I don't fucking care, and I was like, you're
No,
an evil-hearted
he
person, he's a
he,
cat.
he
Let
fucking
him
was
be
an asshole.
loved! No, he wasn't doing it on purpose. How would he be? How would you feel? You have to put yourself in
How would I feel if like the one
I
person you
love
care
cats!
about gets just killed off for a cat that
Who cares
doesn't?
about other people anyways?
Yeah, but the
Um,
whole thing, that whole scene is
agree to
very.
disagree.
That whole scene was deep though, because she basically tells Daijin, "I never want to see you again," and like just leaves in a huff.
Well, and then after that, though, she ends up seeking out Soda's grandfather because she's like,
There's
well,
also
if
that
anyone can help me,
great scene though of her on the way to the hospital where her clothes are fucking wrecked at this point. She has no
she lost
shoes.
the shoe. Yeah,
She's bleeding all over the place, and everyone's like, "What happened to her?"
yeah.
Um,
So she ends up going to the hospital, um, and she ends up seeking out his grandfather for advice. And his grandfather's kind of an asshole.
it
A
makes
little
sense
bit.
though in context, like
Yeah,
because it's their duty. And he basically is like, "Well, Soda's an idiot, but he did his job." And then
yeah.
she's like, "I need to save him," and he's like, "You're stupid. There's no way to save him." And they argue, and then eventually he's like, "There's one way, but you have to find the main door." And
Well, your door. You
your
have to
door
find your
essentially.
door.
And essentially she then gets the hope she needs and leaves, and then the old man lays back down, looks over and sees another cat in the window, and he goes, "Ah, it's you. It's been forever, hasn't it?" He kind of smiles, and they cut it there, and it leaves it
Yeah,
very
and at
ambiguous.
first, like you kind of think, oh, is that you kind of think
Daijin.
it might be Daijin, but it's actually not Daijin. So she ends up going back to his apartment, gets herself cleaned up, puts her uniform back on. She's like, all right, I gotta get home because she remembers her door. Her door is back home,
Like where
and
she
back
was
where
originally
she was
from
originally from. Yes, that got ravaged by
by the tsunami.
yep. So she's like, I gotta get back there, which ends up turning onto an adventure with where she meets up with I'm brain farting his name. What was
Soda's friend with the oh yeah, because she runs
Tomo-
into him.
Tomoya or
Tom, um,
Serizawa is what they call. Okay, Serizawa. She ends up running
yeah.
into him, but then she also ends up running into her aunt, and then the three of them end up going on a journey in a convertible with a broken roof.
Well, it's a convertible that looks really nice at first, and then it slowly you start realizing this thing's a piece of shit beater that he bought.
Yes.
But what's hilarious is like the whole time the aunt's like, "No, you're not going any with this strange man, like who's clearly trying to take advantage of you." The guy's like, "Whoa, we just met. Like you're clearly getting the wrong idea
I
here."
just want to find my friend, lady. And
And
then
and Suzume is like, "Ma," she's like, "I'm going regardless." Getting in the car, and she's like, "If you want to come too, that's fine, but I'm going."
but I'm leaving. And they end up going on the journey. Some hijinks happen along the way. And
The
eventually it's
sunroof
raining.
doesn't shut.
Yeah, it's raining. The sunroof doesn't shut, and they have to stop at a rest area and wait kind of for the rain to hold up. But it ends up actually leading into a pretty
Heated
heated argument between because the whole time like her aunt is like messaging Sonic. Um,
Oh yeah, one of her
Bill called
coworkers
him
who's
Sonic the whole
because
time.
he was voiced by Roger Craig Smith. Like, let's be real. Um, but the whole time like they're messaging back and forth, and eventually like
He's like, "Oh, you can get on a bus and get home at this point, like, and get away from that guy." And they end up getting into a heated argument of like let's just go home. And Suzume's like, "No, I can't go home. Like, I can't really tell you what's going on, but I have to go."
and
And
eventually the aunt just finally like blows up and basically lets out all her frustrations, which Suzume then also lets out her frustrations, and the two of them end up just it ends up being like this, like you think their relationship just ended like badly, but then you
yeah,
find out her aunt is actually possessed at the time by the other Keystone, which is a large black cat
large black cat, which is the cat that we saw at the
in the
hospital with
window.
Grandpa. So it
What's
ends up
interesting is though, eventually the cat runs off, and the aunt gets up and kind of runs off in shame because it's implied that while it was an exaggeration, she meant everything she said.
like people think like that all the time, and it's not even that they mean what they say, but it's like feelings that bother them. Like it's they wouldn't change it or anything, but deep down there's always those what if scenarios.
Yeah.
But they do end up, it kind of leaves you after that, after the funny scene of her like going and crying into Serizawa's arms
And he drops his ice cream.
Which was a great scene because it's just like man-child. But it ends up going back, and you're not sure if the aunt is gonna continue on the journey, but then it cuts to all three of them back in the car.
Along with both
Suzume's
the cats.
Yep, and both the cats. And things have slightly, they understand their differences, and things have at least cooled down a bit, which is good. But eventually, on their way, after wrecking the car.
Well, because the cats talk and it distracts them, and then he almost runs into a fucking tanker truck, and they run off the side of the road. In like, it's not a big crash, it's just kind of like he ends up going off the course, and then it just kind of slides into a ditch, which causes
the door falls off.
Well, it causes the sunroof to properly shut. He's like, "Hey, it's fixed," and then the door falls off.
Yeah, which was a good moment.
But what happens then is like Suzume's like, "How far are we? I can't be that far out." He's like, "It's like," well, she's like, "It must only be like 10 miles," and he's like, "It's more like double that." And she's like, "Oh well, I'll go," and starts running. And the aunt just grabs it,
finding a bike, and then is like, "No, I'm coming with you," and they end up pedaling together. And they end up making it to her old, basically what's left of her old house, which is basically just the foundation. And she ends up going through the yard and basically finds like a time capsule she left behind. And she ends up opening like her diary. And as she's flipping through it, she's like, okay, there's gotta be something. And then it cuts to like she's flipping through the pages, and suddenly it's all drawn out, like there's lines all over it, like she blocked in. She's like, no, but thankfully right before all the like blacking everything out, it is a picture she did draw of the door and her experience. So she's like, I knew it was real, I knew it happened,
because it's implied that back in the day, like after her mother had died, she had run off because she was a child and she didn't get the fact that her mother was gone.
She couldn't accept it,
And she ended up getting lost in the Ever After, which is the world that this plane exists on.
Yep.
And one of the key things is like we find out too that the chair was actually made by her mother for her, and that's why it's very
sweet,
sentimental to her. And she had mentioned how like she had lost it once, when she got it back, it was missing a leg for some reason.
Yeah.
But she ends up getting to the door
because of the tsunami. I'm assuming it got in the, the whole house was gone, so thankfully the chair survived with the mother's love. But she ends up, finding the door.
We get the greatest scene where like the aunt's like, Suzume, where are you going? And she's like, bye, aunt, and then just jumps through the door and just disappears.
And the aunt's like, what? Like, because she can't see the Ever After or anything.
Yeah.
And she leaves with the two, Daijin and was the other cat named Sajin,
yeah,
or Sajin. I think it's
Sajin. I think it is.
Yeah, Sajin. And they end up going back. They end up going into the world, and she ends up, and it's actually a very good scene between her and Daijin, where Daijin ends up, going, this isn't what I want. I don't want Suzume to be sad, and he ends up sacrificing.
Well, first she gets up to the top of she climbs up the mountain after dodging the worm, because this is the home of the worm, and it's kind of like all over the place there.
Well, because he ends up helping, like she's just trying to dig him out of like the mountain.
Yeah, but what's happening is as she's pulling it out, she's getting like crystallized, because it's implying that they're gonna have to switch places.
Yes.
But as she's pulling it out, Dajin also kind of gets himself in there and ends up taking its place after she eventually does pull it out. And when she does, Soda returns to his human state.
And then
Dajin returns to the crystal.
Well, the cat stone.
Yeah,
the keystone statue. Which is really sad. It's a good moment, but I was sad because I like Daijin. But then they end up working together because Saijin also goes back to its keystone form, and then basically the battle ends with them basically putting the two keystones back in and sealing the worm back in the Ever After, so it can't come back out. At least
We also
in,
they get that great scene where they pierce both ends of it, and that causes it to
yeah,
just
that's what I was
clear out.
saying.
But then we also get the scene that was basically the big, because it's not a Shinkai film without a big Deus Ex Machina moment at the end, where she then runs into her younger self in the ever
Yes.
after, and it's implied the whole time you see like this character that you think's her mother, but then you find out it's actually her
Yeah.
from the future,
Well,
and she ends up
she ends up basically guiding her home, but
yeah,
also like talking her through, basically saying like right now really sucks, but in the future I promise you it'll get better and it'll get easier and you're gonna have a wonderful adventure coming up. And this is a very touching moment.
and
Like,
she gives her the chair, which is how she gets the chair in the past, and like how it
well,
disappeared for a while.
and especially too, like, because it was hard for her to process, even at, like as an adult, like of what to say to her younger self. It was a very good movie moment, and Bill kept trying to ruin it, and I kept telling him to shut up. I'm trying to watch it, so I'm calling you out for your bullshit. Oh,
You do the same thing when I watch shows that I
it
care
was
about.
a good scene though. Anyways, and after that, they end up leaving the ever after. And she finds herself with her reunited with her aunt. Um,
And the friend, I forget his name already.
we forget his name, but he was iconic. But I don't feel like they said his name very often, so that's not on us. That's on the film. It's like
But
Serizawa or something.
yeah, but my favorite part is after they get out, they have a little heartfelt moment where like
Ooh,
everyone basically um
I just bumped poo in the head.
yeah, but they have this nice heartfelt moment where everyone's reunited, and then Soda basically says, I still have to go around and make sure all these doors are closed, so I'm going to go off on a journey by myself. You need to go home and go back to your life. And
Yeah.
basically he promises her when he's done he'll come back and see her again, because they both kind of accepted that they love each other at this point.
Yes.
So and then we get the best scene. My favorite part is the film it doesn't go into full credits, it goes into like the faux credits,
Yes.
where it'll show like show in the credits, but then it'll show like flashbacks of their journey back, where like they run into like first off his car breaks down again, which is great. But then
and they also taped the door shut.
yeah. But then they also run into all the people she met along the way, and it's like the
And
aunt,
it's really sweet. Yeah, the aunt is like, "I'm so sorry. Thank you for taking care of her." And they're like,
or
"Oh
she's
my god,
partying,
she's sweet."
she's partying with the ladies at the club. Um, while Suzume's playing with the kids now, this time without the help of a magic chair.
Yeah.
And it eventually ends where like she returns back to her normal life, and she's now in her final year of high school.
Her and Sonic did not get together. The aunt and Sonic did not get together.
No.
But
She's basically, it's basically a repeat of the beginning of the movie, where she's heading off to her final year of school in her winter uniform now, and she's on the bike path, and
she
lo
runs
and
into
behold,
Soda.
she runs into Soda, and it basically ends on just a happy note where it's
And
like
where he's like, "I promised I came back."
yeah, and then it goes right to credits, and it's a sweet ending. It's a very fulfilling story all the way through. You love the characters. Like Suzume is like, I love the characters in Shinkai's previous film, but I think Suzume might be my favorite like character he's ever done.
Oh yeah. And I think too, like the music was,
It was Rad Wimps once again, which was awesome.
but also like the Suzume song is such a good song.
Mm.
I'm glad it was in the movie quite a bit. Like not even as like the full produced song, but even just snippets was really great. It was like it was very good. Like I was tearing up a little bit at the end, like when like in the final climax of when they were coming back and stuff, and when she was talking to her younger self, like I was like, oh, this is emotional.
Mm.
Which it doesn't happen for me a lot. So it clearly shows how much.
I loved how much of like a growing up story it was, where like she goes on this journey and really finds herself, and like she discovers everything whilst also saving the world. I love the fact that they managed to put like that side story into this whole like save the world plot.
Yeah. I truly think like this was like the Weathering with You was, I feel like it also, like I look at that one as like, he was kind of in this moment of like they felt like he had to follow up with like Your Name.
He didn't like how popular Your Name got and how it
Yeah.
kind of overshadowed all his other work, so he wanted to
And
do
I
something
feel like
different.
and I feel like this one just was like him, just like it felt so much like Your Name, not the story or anything, but just like that the feeling that movie gave off of like this is just a wonderful story.
Yeah. Like I
And it
love the way like Your Name ends on that very it kind of ends on that kind of ambiguous ending where it's like implied that they remembered each other, but it's never
they
fully
might not
explained.
have, yeah.
Weathering with You is that ending. I like that movie, but that ending is so fucking annoying because they literally just the Tokyo's screwed, but hey, we found each other.
Yeah.
Um, Suzume has the best ending of the three because it legit ends on a just happy note.
Oh my god, I want this Nendroid so badly.
Is it the one of her chasing the chair?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's so
I've
good.
seen that one. It's great.
Oh. But I love this story. I thought it was excellent.
I loved Suzume had so many great moments. Like she was such a relatable, likable character. Like because she wasn't perfect. Like she had her moments where you're like, God damn it, girl, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I loved her voice actress's performance. It was like the only real anime role that I believe she had ever done. But she was so good at like
She
what's
was excellent.
Nicole
Really.
Sakura, who I believe is actually a big actress in like other media. Um, but
Hey.
yeah,
Sorry, she was biting my hand.
also the animation in this film was fucking beautiful.
Yes.
All right, so we'll save our thoughts for that.
Ow! Sorry, it's getting angry and it's
Yep.
biting me.
So we'll save our thoughts for the end, but we had one more film we covered.
Yes. And this one was the Netflix one I mentioned a couple times. This one was a Netflix exclusive anime movie called Drifting Home. Or Drifting Apartment That Announces Rain, the Japanese title.
Yes.
But this one was they're calling it a coming of age fantasy adventure comedy drama. So a lot in one.
Hmm.
Who is it made by? It was made by Netflix. It was
It was
produced by
funded by
Studio.
Netflix.
Yes, funded by Studio Colorido.
Sure.
Stop it!
And it was
I was just
directed
reading
by
online.
Hiroyasa Ishida. I don't really know any of their other work. I guess Studio Colorido, they've also done A Whisker Away and My Oni Girl.
Okay, which I
Um,
think are also two other
yeah, they're both on
um
Netflix.
other Netflix, which I've heard great things about. A Whisker Away as well, and My Oni Girl. Um,
Hmm.
he's done some. Oh, let's see. Okay, he's done. They've done Pokemon animes.
Okay.
Um, Pokemon Twilight Wings. Uh, at least that's what it looks like. It looks like relatively newer though.
Hmm. Um, so this film, the reason we had a few options when we were trying to pick our third film, the reason Alex had mentioned this one initially, and then when I was looking at the one she picked, the reason I picked this one was it had the best ratings, but also
Mhm.
the idea just sounded interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and the art also just looked really nice.
I also
Um,
didn't want to do another romance, so I figured we'd go with something that wasn't.
yeah. No, this one was. I mean, it's centered around kids. I'm also
Yeah,
trying to
elementary
see.
students.
Let's see. I was trying to see if he directed anything else super noteworthy, but nothing. Mostly just the other two we talked about:
Hmm.
the Penguin Highway and the.
Yeah. Um, so the film, this one is very definitely a different tone compared to the other two we watched, where it's kind of
Yes.
like it revolves around a group of elementary school or yeah, I think they're elementary school kids.
Yes.
And they're ending their final day of the school year, and they're
Well,
about to.
a group of elementary school kids, but mostly it's centered around two kids,
Well, yeah,
Kozuke and Natsume, who are 11
voiced
year olds that they basically grew up as siblings.
voiced by Bryce Happenbrook. Aaron Yeager and Cassandra Lee Morris. So two very
That
well
was
known.
that was kind of funny when I kept hearing him talking. I was like, Aaron Yeager. But that was pretty funny. But
Yeah.
what? So it's centered mostly around their relationship, and they were very close growing up, and then they because it was shown that Natsume had some family issues. Her parents went through a divorce. And then she ended up staying with Kozuke's grandfather.
Yeah.
Um, and their relationship was kind of strained after the
Well,
death of the
the
grandfather.
death of the grandfather, also keeping in mind their kids.
Yo, yeah, they're
And
kids, but
kids go through. We were kids. When you become older, you don't like the people you used to like. It's just how it is.
yeah, no, and I don't even think it was really that with them though.
Well,
I think they just had this.
no, but I felt that relationship felt very real in the sense, though, like you get older and it's just that you kind of drift apart for a while. It's just kind of a thing that happens.
Yeah, but one of the big things is that in the story is that Natsume is struggling a lot harder with accepting the grandfather's death.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of it is actually coming from some guilt that she's harboring that she feels, and we'll kind of talk about it later. But because of that, like, so they basically grew up in these different apartment complexes, and now they're going to be tearing them down. But she keeps visiting the complexes, and they're kind of known as these ghost housing complexes. They got ghosts in them. Um, and it turns out that she kind of keeps visiting them to see someone named Nopo. Um, and eventually, at one point, all of their gang of friends, a couple of them end up going and searching the place to look for go ghost hunting.
Yeah.
Which they are really cute cast of characters.
I love all of the characters in this movie because they are literally like the perfect. One thing I hate in stuff like this is like they'll have like these kid characters, but they write them like adults, and it just feels weird.
No, these
These
are
kids
kids.
are fucking kids.
Yeah.
Like they are so spot on personality wise. Like one of them we meet also named Rena, who is like kind of like the preppy like rich girl.
Yes.
Um, she is such a bitch, and I love it. Like she
Yeah.
is so fucking spot on character wise. It's not even funny.
I really enjoyed. I really liked all of them. But eventually they end up, at one point they all end up on the roof. The main
And
group of
they
friends.
kind of get into an argument like children do,
Well,
which
it ends up being centered around. At first, it's kind of the tension between Natsume and Reina of just like kids being kids. Reina has a crush on Kozuke, and
Kosuke
Natsume
doesn't
could
understand what women are yet. It's one
and
of those
Natsume
things.
could care less. um,
Yeah.
But then it evolves into Kosuke and Natsume having a argument and a physical fight over when he discovers that she's holding onto a camera, which this camera happens to be his grandfather's camera. And he kind of wants it back because he's like, that's my grandfather's camera. I've been looking for that. Why do you have that? And it ends up leading into a strain, which the fighting ends up turning into like it starts downpouring
Well,
out of
first
nowhere.
she falls. First she ends up falling off the side of the building.
Well, first I was gonna go into like it starts downpouring, they're fighting, she's trying to get away to get the camera out of her hand, and she ends up climbing up this post, and then suddenly at the top of the post she ends up losing her balance. Kozuke tries to catch her, she ends up falling, and suddenly
A giant
even
torrent of water just comes
yeah,
down.
and when everyone comes to, they discover that the apartment complex is now just floating in the middle of the sea. Like they even look
This,
up below it and they see that like there's nothing below the buildings.
yeah, this is such a weird supernatural thing to me. Like I'm still not exactly sure what's going on here, but for the sake of the film, I kind of just let it go.
Well, so what I took it as is that these floating because they end up running into other floating structures along the way.
A
And
lot
what
of
these
them were
structures
structures that were destroyed in the past.
well, to me what I put them as is that these structures are all memories from the past whether they be good or bad, that the characters have some sort of connection to. And with all these memories, is almost a, not all of them have them, but some of them do, and it ends up getting revealed later on, is that there's a person that's kind of tying these memories to there, that's been watching out and looking after them and has been, helping them along the way. And that's where kind of Nopo comes in. He's not necessarily, it's never really revealed if he actually lived in the apartment at one point and was someone who like died or something. It's never really spoken like that.
Well,
it's more of just he's like this almost like guardian watching over
yeah.
Natsume and Kozuke.
Well, because we find out later that there's more characters like him.
Yeah, so that's what I was talking about with the buildings, is that there's more of these almost guardians, but all of these different in this other world, all of these buildings have some sort of meaning and some sort of like memory behind them. Because of course at the beginning, like they're just like, okay, like we'll survive, we'll put SOS symbols out and
we need to just find some food. We'll be okay.
Yeah.
My favorite line is,
well, at first it's not even that. It's like, okay, we have enough food, we'll survive, someone will rescue us, and then eventually it turns into not that.
My favorite line is still when Rita's like, I have to use the bathroom. And then the kid's just like, just go pee in the ocean. She's like, that's disgusting.
Like, it's not even really the ocean, which is funny.
I loved her reason. She's like, that's disgusting.
Like, I can't remember all the jokes, but like the group of kids, like there's some really funny comedic moments.
And it is so well written in that regard.
But what ends up happening is that eventually they are running out of food, and they're noticing that buildings are kind of passing by. And Kozuke gets the idea of like, okay, I'm going to throw a rope and get to that building. So he ends up getting over there. Natsume somehow follows him. I don't know how she did it. It doesn't really show how, but she ends up following him there. And they end up going through the building, and then they find out that this building, it was the old like swimming recreation building that they used to go to that was basically turned down and demolished. So it's a building of memory, and they're like, okay, there's got to be some food in here. They run upstairs, and eventually they're like, oh, there's a vending machine. They find a vending machine. They can't open the vending machine, but thankfully they end up finding an emergency kit, but Natsume does get hurt during that time.
Yeah. But also the building is starting to get separated from, they have to go now or else they're going to not make it.
So they run back with their food. They have a bit more food to survive, but eventually it gets to the same boat of like, okay, we need more food. But they also discover too, I think before this point, that Nopo isn't human. Nopo is not like
this weird spirit creature thing.
Yeah, he's like, I like to put it as like he's like the guardian of their memories, basically, of that building.
I'll save my theory for when we get to the point where it's relevant, but I have a theory on what's exactly going on here.
Yes. It's left very ambiguous, which is kind of like, I like it because it kind of leaves it up to the person. But eventually they get to another building.
But Nopo feels responsible. Like he feels like he's like, they don't trust him, so he wants to help this time. And he decides he's going to go with them this time to their next building excursion. The thing is, though, this time the building starts crashing into each other and damaging
and I think a part of that too was that when they go in the building, Natsume, at first they're like, okay, we gotta get food, but Natsume ends up kind of going, she's like, oh, I know this building, and she's ends up running down to like a toy shop, and it ends up being revealed that
a lot throughout the film.
Well, but this one, I feel like the buildings falling apart is almost symbolic too, because like her memory, like they're talking about, oh, like, did you like this store? And she's like, no, I hate this store. And then she brings up the memory of like her as a child. It was her birthday. She went to get a present, and then her parents ended up just fighting, and they left with no present at all. So it ended up just becoming a bad memory. So like when the buildings start colliding and falling apart, to me that kind of was symbolizing like, it wasn't a good memory. It was a bad memory, and it was like almost symbolizing the family breaking. There was a break, which was a really good symbolism, but they end up having to get back to their house, the apartment complex, and they don't get any food.
But during this whole scuffle, the rest of the kids are up on the roof, And
Yeah.
because of the storm that's going on, what ends up happening is one of the girls ends up falling off the edge while she tries to go and get like this
I think it
uh
was Jury. I think
yeah,
it was Jury.
the other girl who is Rena's like only real friend.
I
Um
believe Jury.
yeah. She ends up falling off, and in the process, like they end up going to save her, and when they're going to save her, she ends up getting kind of thrown into the building rather than down into the water, and she ends up hitting her head really hard.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the rest of them fall into the water. But unlike before, the water, there's like a weird black void that just kind of destroys everything down there now.
Yeah, it's like it's not real. They're not really in the ocean at this point. If they haven't figured it out, they know now.
Yeah. But what ends up happening is they end up getting out of the water, but Topo has to go like save them by because I'm having a brain for what's the girl's name again?
The main girl?
Natsume.
Natsume,
Natsume ends
yeah.
up getting caught by the void, and like it gets her shoe, and Topo basically has to go down and basically pull her out of it. But in the process, the void gets one of Topo's ankles, and that's where we
Yeah.
find out that he's not human because his ankle foot is gone, and it's literally just a piece of rebar now.
Yeah. Because he's kind of the building spirit.
Yeah. So then, of course, the one I like Rena as a character because she's real, but also at the same time, she is so prone to just being a bitch at all times.
You do have to remember that she is in a very stressful situation of like.
Well, yeah.
But also, like, Jury is. There's a
her
moment
only
before
friend.
that where
Where Jury told her
have
to
a
shut
very,
the fuck up, basically.
Well, no, it wasn't even that. Like, Jury had a moment of like they really connected, and they were like, "Listen, like I care about you, and I'm here for you," and like it was a moment of like where Reina finally realized that like Jury is her true friend and will always be there for her. And it was a very sweet moment. So when Jury got hurt, Reina was very upset. Like she was like, this wouldn't have happened if we weren't doing this like right now. Like, and she's frustrated and she knows like that she's been reeled into this situation of this past because I mean, this memory in these buildings, like it's kind of all based off of Natsume not being able to, accept the grandfather's death. So she's kind of rolled into this mess she doesn't want to be in. So I don't really consider her being bitchy. I just consider her being like very stressed out in a situation that like it doesn't seem like there's any hope, you know. Did you freeze? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Bill froze. Uh I don't know what to do. Bill is not here. I don't know what to do. Bill is not here. Bill disappeared. I don't know what to do. I do. I don't know what to do. Bill's Wi-Fi went out.
Thanks for that song, Alex. That was really wonderful. Yeah, my Wi-Fi completely shit the bed right there. So, sorry for that little gap. We'll be right back. Okay, I'm back.
I was singing and then I started getting distracted and then I started watching TikToks. Let me close that.
Okay, I'm gonna have to. This will be an editing nightmare, but that's fine.
I think it's around 1:35. So I'll write that.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that, everybody. My Wi-Fi just fucking shat itself. And wonderful. Thank God.
Bill's did. I was still talking for quite a bit until I finally looked over and noticed your face was just you going.
Great. I'll fix it later.
They won't see it. But we're almost done with the story. But basically, where we kind of left off is that they had this big conflict, but it basically ends up with them going like, "This building is not going to last. We got to get out of here." Which leads to a bunch of arguings of Nopo needs to stay behind. Nopo needs to come with us, and it's kind of a battle. But it ends up with them. They build a raft. They all get in it. Nopo doesn't go with them. Natsume goes back after Nopo.
When she did that,
And
I
then-
got why she did, but I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
yeah, I was a little bit too. I was like, get in the fucking raft. But she goes back after Nopo, and then Kozuke also goes back to Nopo. And at the same time, the other kids end up being drifted to a different island, which ends up being one of a Ferris wheel, which ends up kind of revealing with the story because it ends up being an island that is special to Reina because she went on that Ferris wheel with her dad and she had very happy memories. So they end up running into, I believe the character is literally just called, the Ferris wheel spirit. She doesn't really have a name, but she ends up helping them and they all end up getting reunited again. But it helps
one of
kind
the
of
most
reveal
ridiculous scenes in the movie, but I fucking loved it, where they use a fucking like line tied to the Ferris wheel to attach it to the building, like the antenna on the building, and they somehow pull the entire building back up, floating again.
You don't need to know. It's
all a metaphor. Like this is all metaphorical shit. But it was just watching that scene, I was like, what the fuck is this even supposed to be?
And they all end up back on the building. And the building ends up drifting.
Eventually they finally reach this land that they've seen in like the distance for the entire time. And when they get there, they realize this isn't.
Oh, there's other kids there.
Yeah, but they realize real quick, like this isn't actually like the world we're from. This is like a land of like all the spirits because it's another character just like Topo.
Yeah.
And Topo basically tells them
not Topo.
Nope, whatever.
Not Topo.
Tree boy. Tree boy. Basically what happens is like he tells them all like this is where I'm off, like our journey is completed here. This is where I belong. But don't worry, the electricity powers that I have, because he has this weird power of like spirit power, is gonna guide you guys home. And the way I interpreted this was the entire story is essentially this is a giant metaphor for like you have emotional baggage and you have to learn to let go.
Yeah.
Which is essentially Nopo going to his little land of his people is literally the metaphor that this is like she's finally letting go of her baggage, and it's all finally.
Well, it was like, so Nopo was trying to help, as much as he could because he saw that Natsume was hurting and was coming back to the apartment, but he also kind of realized that in doing that, he was also hurting her as well because she wasn't letting go. So this was like his time of like, okay, she needed to move on and she needed to accept that, grandpa's not coming back. But those memories, and like, yes, the building will be taken down, but you'll always have those memories with him. You'll always have that connection. A building doesn't symbolize that. It's okay for things to move on and for things to go away.
It's literally one big metaphor for essentially like the way I found Nopo is like he's essentially like the metaphor of like he is the baggage that is basically trying to like he's trying to like push her away and like make her move on from him.
Well, to me he was the symbol. He was the symbolization, like the humanization of her memories and her joy of living in those apartments. That's what it was to me. And it was okay to, let him go, let him, rest. The building's gonna leave, but she'll still always have Nopo there. Might not physically be there, but Nopo will always be there in her heart, which I thought was really good. And it closes where they end up going back.
Well, I love this scene because before they get back, they like the apartment like then starts flying through the sky, and it's just like this fantastical. They basically had the animators wanted to do this fun scene, which was admittedly really pretty to watch.
Yeah.
But basically it flies into like space and they're all like basically like happy because they finally accepted everything. And then it just kind of cuts back to it's just where it was. Like nothing happened. But we find out that it did happen because the parents were like looking for them.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't that the apartment was drifting at sea, but like they had disappeared, They were on a building for a while. So they did like disappear for that period of time.
The thing is, it's implied that it was essentially they were just in the apartments the entire time and the entire thing was like a metaphor. But then we find out at the end, he had the camera and all the pictures are still there.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, no, it happened. I don't understand it. I don't think we're supposed to understand it.
No, but I think it left you with that, like, I don't know where to go from there. Like, they'll definitely always, but they'll always also keep those memories with them and learn from them. But
hmm.
I I really enjoyed the story. I thought it was very different. I like that it was, a younger cast of characters, but I also really, like the concept of, like, grief and, regret
It
and
was
those
very
memories you leave
smart.
behind.
It was very smartly written. The characters were very realistic for their ages, which is something that I appreciate because a lot of animes have this problem where they write the younger characters too old.
Yeah.
Um,
No, but it's also, like, something I think people can relate to. Like, I
hmm,
know for me especially, like, I have that wonderful picture frame of, like, Tilly, um, and, like, I have so many pictures of her in my old apartment. Like, if anything happened to those apartments, I would probably feel the same way, like, those memories, those attachments, like, I had Tilly there for the longest time, like, it it'll never, like, bring her back, but it's always, like, something that I have of her, you know?
hmm.
So, I could relate with it, especially as someone who's moved from place to place to place, a couple
Oh
times
yeah.
and, you know
No, it was a
yeah.
really effective movie, especially something that I had no expectations for because I kind of
No,
just picked
yeah.
it on a whim because it looked
Well,
interesting.
and too, like, I mean, it was this Netflix movie with, like, a studio we've never heard of. I mean, it had some great voice actors in it, but for the most part, like, it didn't know who wrote it or anything, but it was just like, "Hey, let's give it a shot. Let's read
Hmm.
this, let's listen to the story," and honestly, I thought it was better than The Boy and the Heron. I
Yeah, if I'm gonna rank the three of them, it was definitely Suzume, Drifting Home, and then Boy and the Herring.
yeah, I gotta say, just I really wasn't a fan of The Boy and the Heron. Like, I
No, it
I
was
would
just
agree,
a
that's
it was one of Miyazaki's weaker films, in my opinion.
I
Like,
agree.
I gave it a 7. I gave Suzume a solid 9, and I gave Drifting Home an 8 out of the 3.
Yeah, I gave Suzume a 9 as well. I gave Drifting Home an 8, and I gave, The Boy and the Heron a 6.
Yeah. Like,
I just didn't think it was that great.
see,
What?
my thing is for me to give something a 6, I have to really not like it. And I didn't hate Boy and
Oh,
the Heron.
see, I give things 6 all the time.
See, I'm more
It's
generous with
more
my rankings.
well, maybe I go it by the Mal raising ratings, which, like, a 6 on Mal is, like, just,
See, I
like
use AnyList primarily, so like that. And AnyList is a bit more. Um, their rating system's a bit more refined, where it's not 1 through 10. It's actually like percentage based, so you can give like 95s if you want.
yeah, sorry, something popped up on my thing that I didn't want to pop up, um, what was I gonna say? Yeah, I think, like, a 6 is like a, it's like a fine. I think it was, like, 6 was fine, and that's honestly how I felt about The Boy and the Heron.
Yeah,
I didn't think it was great, but I thought it was fine. Um, for me, if something's bad, I give it, like, a 4 or, like, a 3. So I don't consider it 6, but I think we're on the same page. Our ratings might not be exactly the same, but yeah, I just didn't think it was that great. I didn't think it was terrible, but
yeah, it was definitely my least favorite of the 3. I found it to be the hype for it. Kind of, I found it to be disappointing in that sense because people hyped it up like it was really good, and I kind of was like, yeah. I mean, it was fine. It was a
yeah,
Ghibli film.
I feel like too, like that's one of the main problems too, is like it was hype, but also like after the boy and after the wind rises, like
The Wind Rises to me is a masterpiece. Like that is like as good a movie as you can get.
the expectations were so high, and then
I
like
mean, even Ponyo is better, and Ponyo is such a kid movie.
yeah, I mean I really liked Ponyo. I thought it was a really cute story. I don't know.
Like
I would rather watch so many other Ghibli
I'd
films,
literally
or I'd
rather
rather just
watch Wind
rewatch
Rises,
Suzume.
Spirited Away, Porco Rosso, um, House Moving Castle, even Ponyo, Totoro. I'd watch like all of those
Yeah.
before I watch
Yeah.
Boy and the Herring again.
Yeah.
Nausicaa.
So,
Nausicaa. How can you not say Nausicaa?
Nausicaa's a classic.
That
So,
being
yeah.
said, though, Suzume, I have to redo my top 10 movies now because Suzume might actually be in there.
No, definitely. Suzume was excellent.
I don't want to have
make
two
a top
Shinkai
10.
films on my top 10 list, but I might have to because Suzume was so fucking good.
Suzume was really good. Like,
Which is weird because what makes Suzume even better to me is my expectations weren't super high because I thought Your Name was going to be his peak, and then everything else after would just kind of be like good but not amazing. Because Weathering with You, great film. Don't like it as much as Your Name. Suzume, it's so close to Your Name that I'm like actually I'm not sure which one I think is better at the moment.
No, I'd say for me, like, it's Suzume and Your Name are like, it's a toss up. I feel like it kind of depends on what I'm feeling to watch that day, but I would rank them pretty evenly.
That being said, I have to go back and watch all of the other Shinkai films at some point now because
I'd like to do a Shinkai retrospective at some point, but
that's
maybe
a
not at
plan.
9.
No, that's a plan at some point, but like it's like 5 centimeters per second. I've heard is like a masterpiece in itself as well. So, and then I guess we're gonna finally wrap it up with thoughts on Drifting Home.
I mean, we already kind of close. We already kind of talked about it just now, but I thought it was great.
Yeah, honestly, as like a movie I had zero expectations for, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great story. Highly recommend checking it out. Like I'd basically say, watch Suzume and Rising, Drifting Home because literally both of them are on Netflix. Easy to find. Suzume is also on Crunchyroll.
Yeah.
Very easy to watch. Both of them have great stories, and yeah, I highly recommend both of those.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess that'll wrap it up for this episode of Gaming and Collecting. I guess now let's get we're getting kind of late, so let's wrap this up quickly. Yeah. Once again, guys, thanks for joining us on Gaming and Collecting. You can find Gaming Collecting Podcast on all the major podcasting platforms, particularly Apple Podcast and Spotify. Also, be sure to check us out at superpodnetwork.com, where you can find a whole bunch of awesome podcasts, videos, and blogs. And you can also find all the other great shows over there, such as Superpod Saga, Super Ghost Radio, Retro Rehab, Tommy's Video Game Ride Along, A Novel Console, Bar Silence, Fine Time, the Elder Trolls Gaming Podcast, Remember 64.
Did you make that just so you wouldn't forget?
Yes. Gaming Together, Friday Night Gamecast, and then our 3 shows at GNC Podcast Studios, Gaming Collecting, 3DO Experience, and Geek Addicts. And once again, guys, thank you for joining us, and we will see you all later.
See you later, bitches.